that we wanted to use here. And so what I've asked today is some people from the ABoVE campaign who are working on remote sensing products to review those products, including more an overview of data products that are being generated for the entire domain from satellite remote sensing, but then also talk a little bit more about the fire data products. Tatiana Loboda will do that, and then end up with Jan Eitel from the University of Idaho talking about some specific research activities that are using lidar data, which is a new area of remote sensing that's emerging. It's an emerging field. So with that in mind, I'd like to ask Liz, can you start off, please? And I will stop my sharing.
Sure. So actually, Tatiana's going to start off the presentation. She's got a few slides, and then I'll pick it up halfway through.
There we go. Wow, sorry. Here we go. So this is a joint presentation from Liz, Hui, and me, and we are going to be talking about satellite-based ABoVE datasets. So, as you probably know, as I can see many people on this call are also associated with the ABoVE. ABoVE is organized around 6 central science themes: society, disturbance, permafrost, hydrology, flora and fauna, and carbon dynamics. And each of these science themes has a working group and generates its own products, but there are also a lot of products that will serve the needs of more than one science themes and more than one working groups. So today, as Eric mentioned, we were tasked to talk about domain-wide data sets from satellite observations. So we're not going to talk much about airborne observations, and we're not going to talk about more narrowly defined data sets. Everything that covers ABoVE as a whole. And within that, here you see the list of big data sets associated with specific ABoVE products, ABoVE projects from different years, with PIs who are leading those projects. I will talk primarily about wildfire mapping and monitoring data sets that are generated from my pre-ABoVE and my current ABoVE proposals. And then Liz will take over and give you the overview of other domain-wide data sets. Now, there are other fire-related data sets, as Brendan, who is here on the call, and Sandy Verdicke can attest to, but I will just be very selfish and focus on mine. All right. Before we dive in, as the chair of Geospatial Data Group, I have to give you a little explanation about how our products are organized and delivered. Because we have a large domain and we're dealing with satellite data, we needed to come up with a way to store and share our data effectively so that it's easy for users to get all the products to line up correctly. So we accepted a common projection and a common grid and reference system. So we have a very large grid, which is grid A, a medium grid, grid B, and we now have a very, very small grid, grid C, and they're all nesting within each other very neatly. So you can easily move from one very small resolution, such as 5 meters, let's say, to very coarse resolution, such as 500 meters, and still be able to zoom in and out pretty easily between different data sets. So everything that we deliver is going to be, if it's gridded, it's going to be delivered within this ABoVE common projection and common reference grid. And the shape files for all grids and the document that is describing how these grids are organized and how you can navigate between the different grids are all now archived at the Oak Ridge National Lab DAC. And Liz put in a really neat link here. You can see if you click there, you will get to the ORNL DAC website and be able to have access to all these data. So now more to the subject of this talk. Wildfire mapping and monitoring is a very big theme. Primarily disturbance in the high northern latitudes makes sense. So within the scope of my projects, I delivered a couple of coarse resolution active fire burned area datasets. We found a historical archive from advanced very high resolution radiometer. And we have a more modern archive from the MODIS for both active fires and burned areas. From moderate resolution, which is 30-meter Landsat, we have burn severity, which we're going to be using as, expressing as DNBR. And these are going to be annual wall-to-wall mosaics for the entire domain, gridded and projected to the above projections of reference grid, mostly focusing on the scars that appear within Alaskan and Canadian large fire databases. And we also have fire progression maps between 2001 and 2015, which is a value-added model product, and I will describe it a little bit later. From my most recent project, we're developing tundra-wide for the entire North America, but tundra-wide fuel type and loading data sets, mostly to estimate above and below ground biomass. I'll give you a demonstration for the above ground fuel type and talk about a little bit about the plans to deliver that. So the advanced very high resolution radiometer is our only long-term record from coarse resolution data, and pretty much is the only one for hotspot detection. We have worked out an agreement with the dataset developers who agreed to let us release their dataset through the DAC, and it's going to include AVHR hotspots between 1989 and 2000. And the only, unfortunately, attribute of information that comes with those hotspots is the date of detection, which you see here is YYYYMMDD. It's going to cover the entire above domain, both core and extended, and it's actually available for North America as a whole. So the same authors developed the burned area dataset from the AVHR data, again covering the same extent between 1989 and 2000, and they have agreed to release this data again through the above, and we will have burned area from coarse resolution consistently estimated over time. So right now, as part of my project, we're undertaking accuracy assessment of these data sets, and here you see the total cumulative area burned by year in Alaska and in Canada between the AVHR shown here in blue and the large fire databases shown here in orange. And the really good thing, although you can tell that AVHR generally tends to underestimate the amount of area burned, the offset is pretty consistent over time, which gives us a really good hope for getting a record that can be adjusted systematically to get a better idea of the scope of area burned from satellite assessment. MODIS Actify is probably the most well-known component that everybody knows and loves and uses. The only thing I was going to mention here is that in the MODIS Collection 6, which we're going to also package and release on DAC, you can see that in the attributes of information, there is a very interesting column, the very last one, which is type. And that's the first time we get an indication of what kind of fire the algorithm is detecting. Type 0 is wildfire. They also track permanent flares like gas flares and other sources of fire. So you will need to read the user guide that comes with the Collection 6 active fire products to know all the denomination, but this is an important component that I thought I should mention right away. So for Boreal burned area product, we're not using the standard Modis burned area product because it's actually underestimating burned area by quite a bit in the Boreal domain. Instead, this is my own algorithm published in 2011, I think, and we're calling this Arctic Boreal burned area product, ABA. It now covers the time between 2001 and 2015. As you can see, it's produced annually. Everything above 60 degrees north is what we're covering. And we provide the Arctic Boreal burned area user guide. A data set has already been submitted. And in the user guide, we describe the data set, the algorithm briefly. But most importantly, we're giving the accuracy assessment, the rough accuracy assessment, which is really an intercomparison with, again, the large fire databases and with the standard Modis MCD64 burned area product. So we conducted this as scar by scar area burned assessment between the fire perimeters and our algorithm and fire perimeters MCD64. And this is an example for 2004. We have it for every single year, and it's all published in our user guide. The gist is that we're getting slope of the equation very, very close to 1, and our squares are really above 0.99 most of the time. So this data set has been provided to the DAC. The DAC is now posting it. It should become available as soon as they can make it available. So in addition, we're doing moderate resolution burn severity as expressed in DNVR, fully gridded wall-to-wall product. So we're going to be delivering to the DAC through an extended submission, which is year by year, beginning with 2015 and going back to 1984. So what we're going to do, we're going to create annual gridded DNVR layers that will involve everything that's provided by MTBS and everything that we're generating in terms of DNVR for the Canadian side of the above domain. Every single scar that we can get pre and post images for will have a DNVR, and consistently with how MTBS provides it, in those rare cases when we don't have good pre and post imagery, we will provide at least an NBR of the post-fire event, and everything will be documented extensively in the accompanying database in a spreadsheet. So this is in progress. We expect, we hope to deliver the 2015 full scope to the DAC before we leave for our field work in August, but it remains to be seen if we can pull it off. Worst case scenario, we'll get it in by September. One more data set that I wanted to mention is the fire progression modeling. We're using active fires from Modis between 2001 and 2016. This is Collection 6 active fire products. And we are simulating fire spread from those active fire detections within the Alaskan and Canadian large fire databases, perimeters. So we're modeling it at 30-meter resolution. There is no particular reason other than to be consistent with the Landsat resolution. And we are now in the final stages of doing QA and making sure everything is consistent and good. And we hope to deliver that all by the end of July. So again, for every single data set, where the data exists. And the very last bit I was going to mention is the product for the 5-UL type and load for Tasik Tundra that is being produced from my current ABoVE project, where what we're doing is we are developing models that create fractional cover of herbaceous and shrub vegetation within the Tasik Tundra based on the field observations that we collected. Our last season, we only collected data from the no-attack. So here you see a no-attack example, but in 2 more years, we will have those data extended across the full Tasik Tundra biome of Alaska. And what we will ultimately release is sage and grass fraction, shrub fraction, above ground biomass loading, and no, that's about it. So again, for Alaska as a whole. But this is probably about 2 years away from being a full domain-wide data set. And that concludes my talk, and I'm going to pass the baton to Liz.
Hi, thanks. So I'm Liz Hoy, and I'm in the NASA Carbon Cycle and Ecosystems office. And one of our jobs in that office is to help coordinate across all of the projects working as part of ABoVE. And so I'm going to present some of the other large data sets that are being created for ABoVE that are more domain-wide, wall-to-wall remote sensing products. And there are many other products being developed for ABoVE, but we're really trying to focus, as Eric mentioned, on some of the remote sensing products that really span across the entire portion of ABoVE. So I have 2 slides here from Brendan Rogers, and he and some of his colleagues are on the phone as well. Sander is on the phone as well. And they have just come out with a new product that is currently available, 500-meter ignitions, burned area, day of burn, and combustion for Alaska, Yukon Territories, and Northwest Territories from the 2001 to 2015, which they called ACFED version 2. And you can get it from the DAC. It's shown there. They've got an article out recently about it, showing lightning as a major driver of recent large fire years in North American boreal forests. And you can see down in this graphic below that you can see the fires and the combustion across fires in those 3 regions. And I believe if you look to the right, in progress, they're doing synthesis and modeling across 900 burn plots within Alaska and Canada in the study domain, with the goal of extending ACFED to the ABoVE domain. So then you would have combustion across the entire ABoVE study domain. And they have these field validation plots that they've been using to do that. So hopefully next year, March 2018, they'll have that ready. Next slide, please. In addition, they're doing some albedo and climate forcings work. Brendan gave me these slides, they're so pretty, showing this daily blue sky albedo product that is being created. It's a 500-meter product, and that will be archived at the DAC as well. And then they're doing the fire climate forcings product, which would be developing post-fire albedo trajectories as influenced by ecosystem and fire characteristics, combining albedo and trajectories from 2001 to 2012. And then they will also use combustion layers to quantify greenhouse gases forcings at 500 meters from 2001 to 2016. So look for that in, I believe, 2018 is kind of his time frame to get those out. And if you have questions for him too about this, we can ask him at the end as well. Next slide. All right, we have Curtis Woodcock has a project. It's really Curtis Woodcock, Mark Friedel, and Damian Suleimanesh at Boston University are really working on these products. And they are using a Landsat-based data set to look at really three main products that they're going to produce out of this, which will be a disturbance history for the Landsat record, so from 1984 to present time. And then they're also looking at a peak season greening and browning trends product, and then a growing season length product. And so down on the lower left, you can see this processing to date. What they've done is they've used what we call the ABoVE Science Cloud, which is an area here at NASA Goddard where we've staged the entire Landsat record, surface reflections record, next to a large compute location at the High Performance Computing Center. And Damien has taken that Landsat record, he's regridded it into the ABoVE grid and projection, and he has created these kind of image stacks almost, as pixel by pixel. You can kind of drill down into the record, and he's using that to create these 3 products. So I believe now he might have gotten all of the images tiled to the grid. And on the right, you can see some of the types of products that will come out of this greenness trends product. They're doing land cover and disturbance. And so it's not just any kind of, it's not just fire disturbance, it's fire, pests, and logging. And then they're looking at these low frequency changes such as greening and browning. And it will be wall-to-wall over the entire ABoVE study domain, which is good to know too. All right, next. All right, now Chris Nye and his group, Paul Montesano, and they are located here at NASA Goddard, and they have two kind of products that they're working on. So in both of their products, they're really focusing on circumpolar forest structure. And this product it's not a wall-to-wall product, but it has samples throughout the study domain. So I added it in here just to help better explain what's going to be on the next page. They're using high-resolution spaceborne imagery from Digital Globe, which has sub-meter pixel sizes, to kind of map elevation in various areas throughout the ABoVE study domain and in Siberia as well. So anywhere there is red on this diagram, that is an area where they are doing this elevation model. And those elevation models will be available once they are complete. But the red areas are where they're doing that. So it's not wall-to-wall, but it has many areas within this study domain. And the gray areas are areas where they could continue that processing as time allows. So this will help them to better understand forest structure. But on the next page, now they're really looking at the tree canopy. And so they're using the elevation data that they've collected as well as field work and some lidar data, some PALS lidar data, to get a better understanding of what the tree canopy cover is, what the height is. So tree canopy cover estimates are calibrated to canopies greater than 2 meters in height. And it's at a 30-meter resolution from 2010 to 2015 epoch. Let's see. Landsat-based multispectral cover. This was originally done by Joe Sexton's group at University of Maryland, and so Paul and Chris have worked with that group to calibrate and validate this, especially for boreal regions. So this will extend through the ABoVE study domain, and actually it goes really to the circumpolar north. And so they're really trying to get horizontal cover with that, and then the surface models are helping them to get vertical height at individual sites. And both of these will be sent to the Oak Ridge stack when they're complete. Next. So Mark Carroll is a scientist at NASA Goddard, as well as he's at University of Maryland. And he created a Landsat-based surface water change product. It shows surface water from 1991 to 2011 in three time slices. So it kind of gives you the decade around 1991, and then 2001 and 2011. And he did this in a similar fashion as to what Damien did, where you've taken the Landsat record, and he took the entire Landsat record. If you look on the left, he kind of stacked the images together, created an output product, and really was able to look at these surface water changes over on the right. And this is just one example in Canada, where you can see change in this lake, where in 1991 it was a very large lake, and then it's gotten much smaller by 2011. So these these decadal time step maps are available at the Oak Ridge Stack now. There's a link at the bottom which will take you there, as well as the data citation is there as well. So that would be one of our hydrology products. And if we go to the next slide, we have a second hydrology product. This is a fractional open water cover for the Pan-Arctic and above domain region from 2002 to 2015. And this was created using AMSR-E and AMSR-2 data, using the brightness temperatures from those sensors. It's a 10-day average time step at 5 kilometer spatial resolution across they have 2 regions. They've done it for the above study domain, and they've also done it for the Pan-Arctic. It's available at the Oak Ridge DAC. And let me see if I wanted to, this documents open water and patterns and inundation dynamics across the study domain and could be used for that type of analysis. Next. And then Kevin Schaeffer, and Tatiana, can you advance one more as well? There you go. Kevin Schaeffer has a remotely sensed active layer thickness product, and this one gets a little bit into modeling, but I included it because he is using some satellite data in what he's doing as well. He is taking INSAR data, some interferograms created using radar data to determine active layer thickness at a site. And then, so he's done this for smaller regions. On the right, you can see it's done for Barrow. And then through his project, he'll be using some of the airborne data, the L-band and P-band radar data, as well as RADARSAT-2 data to look at this over a much larger region. And eventually he will scale this data across the entire above study domain using, I think he also plans to use some SMAP data as well to do this kind of modeling across the domain. So it's not exactly completely remote sensing, satellite remote sensing, but just to give you another type of product, this would kind of fit within that permafrost science that Tatiana mentioned earlier. Next slide. There is one other product. Maybe, do we have a minute? Maybe, may I share my screen, Tatiana? How do I do that? Let's see. I have one other on mine. Let me get down to it. Let's get to my slideshow. There we go. Can you guys see that? All right.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So this is an ABoVE product. So if you are familiar with the Arctic DEM that is being done by the Polar Geospatial Center, they have done the Arctic DEM, which is a kind of 2 or 5 meter resolution elevation model across Arctic regions, which they have defined as north of 60 degrees north. So it doesn't cover all of the above study domain, this Arctic DEM. But we've worked with the Polar Geospatial Center to take their code and create something like the Arctic DEM, but not, we don't want to call it the Arctic DEM, because that's what they've called their product, but just to create an elevation model for the rest of the above study domain south of 60 degrees north. So what you'll see in this larger picture in the center is the region of the above study domain that is south of 60 north. And we are currently processing that area to be the same, to do the elevation model just as Polar Geospatial Center has done for the Arctic DEM. And we're about halfway through. The data are not available yet, but when they are, we will send them to the Oak Ridge DAC. And I think Polar Geospatial Center will set up a site where they can interested parties can download them, similar to the Arctic DEM, but some type of sister site to that. So this creates a digital elevation model or digital surface model. It's going to get whatever the top of the elevation is at an area. So it could be the top of the tree, or it could be the top of the snow, or it could be the ground. So you have to be careful in how you interpret it and use it. But it's on the right, you can see this example DEM strip, which is about 17 kilometers by 110 kilometers. And there are many, many, many of them across the study domain. We've processed about 12,000 strips, and I think we have about 12,000 more to go. So when they're finished, we'll make them available to the community. And so just as a summary, all the above data sets that we've talked about here are available or will be available through the Oak Ridge National Labs Distributed Active Archive Center. That's what we call the Oak Ridge DAC or RNL DAC. And the gridded data sets will be delivered in the above projection and the grid system that Tatiana mentioned. Non-gridded products such as shapefiles will be delivered in the above projection and made available also on the DAC site. And all data sets are supported by user guide documents and generally have accompanying peer review article. And you'd find them at the DAC as well. You can also go to our ABoVE website, above.nasa.gov, and we have links to all of the projects that we discussed today. Towards the beginning of this presentation, we had a slide in there that had the website link on it, and you can go there and search through all of the different projects that we have to find out any more information you'd like about them. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Liz. I'd move on to Jan right now then.
Yeah. Can you see my, oops, it's not up yet. Can you see my screen? Should be there now. Good, okay. Well, first of all, I would like to thank Eric for inviting me here to talk to all of you, which I think is an exciting opportunity. Also, thanks everybody for listening. And I want to present a little bit on our NASA ABoVE funded project that's entitled LIDAR Passive Spectral and Ecophysiological Approaches to Link Forest Tundra Ecotone Structure and Function. So ecotones are basically transition zones between two communities. So for example, here in this slide, you can see a forest here on the left-hand side and the grassland on the right-hand side. And so this transition zone here, this is what an ecotone looks like. And for a long time, ecologists have recognized the importance of those ecotones, in particular for biodiversity purposes, but also for other reasons. And so, for example, Eugene Odom writes in his 1959 Fundamentals of Ecology book, since well-developed ecotonal communities may contain organisms characteristic of each of the overlapping communities plus species living only in the ecotone region, we would not be surprised to find the variety and density of life greater in ecotone. So basically, the take-home message here is ecotones are ecologically of high importance. Now, one of the world's largest ecotones is the transitional zone between the boreal forest, which is shown here in kind of like the gray here, and the tundra, which is kind of shown here in red, with approximately 13,000 kilometers. So it's a really vast ecotone. However, despite its large extent, we know relatively little about this enormous ecotone, and hence there's really a big need to get a better understanding about the current function of this ecotone and how it might respond to climate change. And this research need has been actually summarized and identified in 2002 by the International Arctic Science Group, and they identified basically two main things that have to be accomplished. The first thing is really just the mapping of the current extent of this ecotone. And then the other thing that has been highlighted by this group and by this article is to get a better understanding about the current function of this ecotone, as well as get a better understanding of how this ecotone might respond to environmental change. In terms of efforts that have been efforts like remote sensing efforts to really map this ecotone, so this some work has been done by John Renton at NASA, who has done quite a bit of mapping of the forest ecotone, and I think he talked to your group maybe a few weeks ago. At least this is what I saw on the site. And so he has done quite a bit of work mapping the current extent of the forest ecotone. Now, while those maps are actually quite important for us to study the forest tundra ecotone, they don't provide us with a lot of information about the function of this ecotone and also how this important ecotone might respond to climate change. So now the big question is obviously then, so like how can we get some understanding about the function of the forest tundra ecotone? Well, to answer that question, or to study the function of this ecotone, we have to understand what really drives the function of the forest tundra ecotone. And a lot of those factors that really affect the function of this this ecotone are linked to its structure. So for example, sky exposure, partial shading of open patchiness, interception of solar radiation by tree canopies, interception of precipitation by tree canopies, and wind velocity. All those components then affect other variables such as soil temperature, soil moisture, germination, those type of things. So again, like there's a clear link between the structure of those systems and their function. Now the question is, how can we get this structural information first? Well, there are different ways to do this, and I guess Liz presented some of those ways. For example, some of the approaches Chris Ney and his group are using. The other way to get this structural information is to use lidar technology. And just to give you an idea, I know some of you are familiar with lidar data, but just to give you an idea of how this lidar data looks like, here's a little, you know, like a little video showing lidar data we acquired at one of those forest tundra ecotones. And by just looking at this data, you can see the wealth of structural information we can get from lidar data. So so lots of structural detail there in this data. So now with our project, what we're trying to accomplish with this NASA ABoVE project, what we're trying to do is to integrate lidar, passive spectral, and tree ecophysiological data to link biophysical structure to ecological function in the forest tundra ecotone. And by doing this, we hope to be able to remotely assess the vulnerability and resilience of the forest tundra ecotone to environmental change. To give you an idea about more specific objectives of our work. So really the first part of our work, what we're focusing on is to better characterize the microstructure of the forest tundra ecotone. And again, we're trying to do this by using lidar technology, and then link that structural information we get from lidar with with the physical growth environment. So that's the first part. And then the second part is really linking some of the structural information to its function. So that's objective 3 and 4. So really two distinct kind of components there. First, just characterizing the structure, then linking it to the growth environment, and ultimately the function of this of the forest tundra ecotone. In terms of to reach those objectives, we have 2 study site locations. One of them is located along the Dalton Highway in Alaska, and we installed some plots there in 2016. And then this summer we installed some plots in Canada near Inuvik at the forest tundra ecotone, at those locations we've taken a suite of different measurements. And so some of the measurements we are taking include just basic measurements to characterize the growth environment. So we take soil temperature measurements, air temperature, wind speed, and then we also measure plant function. So we take repeated measurements or repeat manual measurements of chlorophyll fluorescence. We also have radiometers installed that continuously measure the photochemical reflectance index, which is a spectral index that provides some information about plant function, as well as we installed some point dendrometers that basically measure in very high resolution the swelling and shrinking of a tree and over a longer time period, its growth. Besides those measurements, we also took some terrestrial lidar measurements, as well as we also have an autonomously operating terrestrial laser scanner installed in some of those sites, with the hope to get a better understanding about snowpack dynamics and trying to link that to the function of those trees. Besides those measurements, we're taking on the ground. We also have data sets available that were acquired from an airplane. So we have aerial lidar data available for each of our study sites, as well as chlorophyll fluorescence imaging spectrometer data that was acquired from an airplane as part of the NASA ABoVE airborne campaign. And so those data sets were acquired over the last few weeks. Unfortunately, since we just completed our first year really of data collection, I don't really have anything like to show in terms of results, though we're pretty close to having a few things we can start showing. However, to kind of give you an idea of what we're currently working on, different people on the team are currently working on, I just listed a few things here. And those things can be mainly categorized in, I would say into 3 categories. So first of all is trying to further improve our ability to map the current extent of the forest tundra ecotone. And then the other 2 areas we are actively working on is really trying to make that link between the structural component of the forest tundra ecotone, the physical growth environment, and then its function. So that's what we currently actively working on. And I anticipate that probably this fall, we have the first results to share. Finally, I would like to acknowledge people on this team, the co-PIs on this project, Kevin Griffin down here, then Natalie Bowman and Leah Virling, as well as the students that are part of this project, Annie McGuire, Joe Jensen, and Joe T. Genevine. Also, I would like to acknowledge, obviously, the funding we received from NASA ABoVE to do this work. Thanks everybody for your attention, and hopefully this can spark some questions or discussion here later on. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Tatiana, Liz, and Jan for their presentations. I'd like to spend a few minutes here if anybody has any questions. Meredith, do you know how to sort of regulate this, getting people in and out with questions with this system?
So if you have a question, unmute yourself. I had to mute one person, so you might not know if you're muted or not. So just speak up, and normally it runs pretty smoothly. Or if you don't have connection to audio, you can type it in the chat box, type your question.
I had a question for Tatiana. And I was curious about the AVHR-based fire product, which I think was from 1989 to 2000. And I was curious, is that also 60 North that you're working on? Is it burned area and active higher hotspots? And what's the resolution of that product?
Hey, Brandon, the product technically exists for the entire North America, but we only promised to deliver it for 60 North. Although my understanding is that the dataset producers are happy to release the whole thing. They don't really care whether we're limited to 60 North or not. It is a 1.1 kilometer, the nominal AVHRR resolution in both hotspots and burned area.
Cool. So it does exist, and yeah, I guess I would just put a vote in there if it's possible to get the domain-wide stuff. That'd be excellent.
Thanks for the suggestion. I'll do that.
Brendan, actually I have a question for you about your Albedo product. So that's coming out in 2018, is that right? Or will be available?
Well, yeah, if you're interested, we can talk. We have it now, and we have it sort of, I think, updated through May of 2017. We're just really sort of getting cracking on all the analysis. So my thought was to wait a little bit before archiving it officially to make sure we work through if there are any bugs that we haven't seen or anything like that. But as far as I know, it's working pretty well. We worked with Crystal Schaff's group to integrate their algorithms they've been developing for multiple scattering, all these things that seem to matter more at high latitudes. So if you're interested, we could talk, and I could potentially try to archive it sooner. It's just a balance between giving ourselves a chance to work with it and make sure it's all good to go.
Thanks.
I saw a question on the chat box from Eric Staffran, who asked if the data sets we talked about today would be available on the ABoVE Science Cloud to be able to be put into the ABoVE benchmarking system. And so the ABoVE Science Cloud is a collaborative space we've set up for other ABoVE scientists who can get logins for that area. And it's not meant to be an archive center. So if you are from the broader community and you want to access these data, you should go to the Oak Ridge DAC and get them. But the answer is yes, Eric. Any of these data sets we could also put onto the Science Cloud for other ABoVE scientists to use and to generate, use them as inputs for additional products. So we can talk about any of them that you want to add when they're available.